And you can tell.
You are live.
She could have done it exactly.
Are we ready? Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Robbins.
Here.
Commissioner Rushton.
Present.
Commissioner Bailey.
Present.
Chairman Russell.
Here.
Commissioner Patricia Solis Little.
Have not heard from.
Commissioner Eldire.
Here.
Commissioner Lautner.
Present.
Thank you. We'll hope that Patricia can join us later. Do we have any public comment?
Is this your shot, Jessica?
We do have, before we go to commissioner comments, we have two items on the agenda, the county administrator search and 2023 budget, and Mr. Janik will lead us in the discussion for both those areas to get us started. And I would like to suggest that we aim to conclude about 4 o'clock or earlier. I think we have a couple of us have events tonight, and if that's okay, we could shoot for that and see where we are. Commissioner comments? You're on.
All right, well, thank you. And just a follow-up, I think both Darcy and I mentioned that Darcy contacted all of the 6 candidates that interviewed and all that expressed interest in being still a candidate. The 7th candidate never responded to phone calls or emails from Darcy or me. So we're assuming he's dropped out, that he hasn't. It's been a couple weeks now, so obviously he had a chance to contact us. We don't know what his circumstances were because he did not reach back, or nobody from his family reached out to us. So let me just go over a couple of things, maybe about the process first. What I did is I'll pass these out. So what I did is combine the list of the original questions with the ones that were asked in round 1 in one document. Well, I'll just wait till it's I want to compliment all of you. We, I think, stayed with our timeline last time. We gave 45 minutes and 14 questions, and I know part of you were biting to ask follow-up questions, but I think we did a good job. I think every candidate stayed focused on. So this is a complete list of questions, the original list, but in red, I put the questions that were asked. Now, some were combined, so there's more than 14 in red, because remember, some of the questions we combined into one question. So the ones that are in red were the ones that were asked, and then there's different wording because we combined them, but these are questions that were asked. So what you have left is a list of questions that I originally suggested with the categories, and they are either in black, which means they have not been asked, or the ones that are in red, the ones that have been asked. So I thought that would be helpful for the next step. What I would think would be a logical next step, once you determine who the finalists are, you obviously have to set a meeting schedule. The only candidate that has a conflict coming up is Deborah Allen. She had a long time pre-COVID trip planned with her husband to Europe. It was canceled a couple times, and they're leaving early next week and won't be back until October 9th. And we told her that we would let the board know. And we certainly said, don't stress about it. obviously, they didn't know his job was gonna open, and it was something they planned prior to COVID, and just kept getting canceled and canceled and canceled. So that's the only candidate that expressed any issues, right? No one else had any conflicts. Because remember what you stated for the second round, you are willing to pay travel and hotel. That was in the brochure for final rounds. So that's something to think about too. So depending on how many candidates you pick, obviously then we look at dates. What I suggest is a format where if they're a finalist, we schedule an hour time for employees to meet with them through a very informal meet and greet, not interviews, and it's just to get a feel, because sometimes you pick things up, and if you as commissioners want to come to that, you're more than welcome to. I've been through it 3 times when I was school superintendent, and it does kind of give you a feel, and I think the staff would appreciate that opportunity to at least see the candidates and have a more, it's a dialogue, it's not an interview. If they want to have open comments, they're welcome to do it. If they don't, it's just, if they want to stay for 5 minutes or 10 minutes or drop in, no set formula, it's just a very informal meet and greet that all of you would be welcome to attend if you wish to. If you don't, that's fine. And then what Darcy and I talked about is an hour-and-a-half time slot, but really give you 2 hours. And more of a dialogue instead of go around and ask specific questions. I know a lot of you are taking notes. You may have questions you want to follow up on, or simply go through this list. And these are sample questions you can ask. And I don't think we have to assign questions to people. You want more of a dialogue. Obviously, you want to give all 7 commissioners a chance to ask questions. And what the times I'm involved with that, you kind of go around in circles so each commissioner can, let's just say, start off with 2 questions. And then that may lead to follow from us, but at least give everyone a chance to ask at least 2 specific questions. And just have dialogue and more of an interaction than a formal interview. And then we said, like I said, hour-and-a-half schedule, but give you 2 hours, because something they may lead to other questions, but give you flexibility. And you'll not want to do more than 2 per day. I don't know how many you're gonna pick as finalists. But I think 2 a day is plenty, especially if you do the meet and greet and then the interview process. But during that interview, most of them never been really. So that part of it is either I or Darcy or someone will give a brief tour of the building too, just so they have a feel of what's going on. Does that make sense? So the big challenge now is which ones of the candidates you want to bring for the second round, or are there other candidates you want to bring in for a first round too? I mean, that's something that we talked about at one time. Have a dialogue after the first round to see if you want to bring anybody else for a second round, or bring anyone that was not in the first round for an interview, or do you want to just go to the second round of interviews? And there is no right or wrong way to do it. It's up to the 7 of you. Darcy, could you call on Tricia? Do you have for someone?
Let's make sure everybody gets to have some input. And Deb, why don't we start with you? What are you thinking?
I'm thinking a lot of things. I'm not sure if it's to our advantage to continue to do first round or just to move to second round. So there were a couple others that I wouldn't mind listening or interviewing for a first round. However, I think we have a couple great candidates to pick from. We always have the option of going back for a first round, I guess. So if we move right to the second round, we can either confirm our convictions or make a decision if we need to just continue to look.
Yes, we have not sent any letters out to any of the 68
Right.
candidates.
Yeah,
So technically, they're all still part of it.
so I guess maybe my instinct would be to go ahead and interview for a second round. And if we're comfortable, because we're really looking for someone who can take over the leadership. And if they have those abilities and the personality, the mindset, the conviction, you know, then we have our person. Kind of what I think.
Yes, I'm prepared to go ahead with the second round of interviews with at least 2 of the candidates. I also would like to go through the meet and greet. Take a little time to digest both and determine where I'm at, but as a board, we would determine whether we are satisfied with the candidate or we want to go out.
Yeah, that's a good point. It doesn't happen very often, but sometimes boards go through this process and really don't feel comfortable, or there's not agreement among who to choose, and sometimes they open search back up again. And so a good example is Glen Lake Public Schools. Last year, they opened for superintendent, they interviewed, they posted the interviews, but the board just did not feel comfortable. They could not agree on a candidate. And so they said, we're gonna start the process all over again, which they did. Had a different pool of candidates, and actually picked one this time. So it really is up to you. Don't feel pressure. I think what happened last time, and Melinda, you were the only one here. When you interviewed numerous candidates, you could not agree. You made the offer to 3 candidates, you could not agree on contract terms. And I think the board felt pressure to make a decision, so they picked their 4th choice on a 4-3 vote, and that did not work well. for
Majority of the
or
board
the individual.
felt pressure to do that.
Yeah, so I think, don't
Yeah.
put yourself in that situation.
Yeah, that's what I said. We also would at that time get some, get some input from the employees, which is part of the meet and greet process, which we haven't had up till, I haven't had at least, not yet.
I'm ready to move forward to the next round. That would be great. Move to the next round.
I was reminded by the clerk to make sure we speak into the microphone.
I think he's finished. So yes, I would want to move on to the next round. I was interested in, we handed in our scoring or comments.
One commissioner did, you were the
Oh,
one.
I was the only one?
Oh, thank you. Okay.
Okay. I was kind of interested to see how much common ground we had, but I guess that didn't work. So, yeah, I'm ready to go to the next 2-3 candidates. And I like the idea of involving the staff and having an informal opportunity for staff to give us input.
General.
And I agree, I'm ready to move forward. My bias is that we interview anybody that a couple of commissioners are interested in. Because I think we need to try to find a final candidate that all 7 of us say, that's the choice. Because I'd love to have the administrator have full support. That may not happen, but I think if we go slow, that could happen. And I think we ought to hear from each of us who our top 2 or 3 are, and then see what we're looking at. That would be my thinking.
And just another example. What you don't want is someone coming in on the 4-3 vote, if there's 3 that are negatively opposed. When the college did the search for last president, I was on the task force. The final vote was 4-3, but they had 2 outstanding candidates. And once the vote was 4-3, the other 3 then made a motion to, and they made a 7-0. So it wasn't that they were opposed to who they selected, it's just there were 2 highly outstanding candidates. A 4-3 vote can be a very negative thing, but in this circumstances, it was a 4-3 for a positive reason. And then the 3 that did not support the candidate who was successful at the end made a motion to endorse it, so it's 7-0. So that's a 4-3 vote can mean different things.
When I went through the superintendent's academy, they suggested be very careful if you have less than a 7-0 vote at the end. And I think that's what we ought to shoot for. I mean,
Yeah, I think it doesn't matter. I mean, it depends on the quality of candidates. But if you, let's say there's 2 or 3 board members that really are opposed to a candidate, that would be difficult for that candidate to come in and try to be successful. He doesn't have, he or she doesn't have.
Would it make sense that we all report on our top 3 candidates? And if we can't have 3, then we say our top 2?
Or just another idea, and you can do it this way. We just go to the candidates. If you want them for, pilots, just raise your hand and we'll see where we are. And then kind of, it's a very informal straw vote. But that way it doesn't put pressure on each board member to be first or be last or hear whatever else is saying. So we'll just go by alphabet order, if that's okay. So the first one is Deborah Allen. She get a second. Let me count here. Okay. Carl Pullman. Kyle Harris.
Maybe the only one,
Well,
but I didn't.
we're just taking a straw vote.
No,
now,
I
so not
understand. I
five.
did, I saw something there, so.
Patrick Lamb. James Kalnick. Dan Ryan. Thanks. Okay, so 2 candidates got 6 votes, 1 got 3, and 2 other ones got 1. So, Mr. Chairman, I'll leave it up to you.
Should we discuss why we supported?
Well, for the sake of time, if 6 of you agree on Deb Allen and Patrick Lamb, there's no sense discussing those 2, right? Right? So you all agree those 2 will be in the second round, correct? Okay.
So the next one was Fulmer, and that was my 3rd choice of the 6. But you 2 raised your hand for Fulmer. So, want to talk?
Yes. He's motivated, I should, this isn't the first quality, but I just, this isn't the first reason. The first reason is of his broad experience with boards and working with county governments. Although he's not in, he has broad experience working with governmental entities. So, and he has a deep knowledge of grants and working in this environment. And that was one of our asks, was someone with, or very familiar with county government or governmental functions. And that deep experience. I love his housing experience, and we could sure use somebody with some deep knowledge there. I think he's motivated to live here. He said he would even take a pay cut to come here because he does have a house on mission for which he's paying a mortgage, so the guy wants to come. But he was my first choice just because he had one of the primary things we were looking for, and that is an awareness of and an ability to work in the county government, in the government sphere.
Lois?
Yeah, so he, as she says, a great deal of experience. Again, I think he would have to take a pay cut, but it seems like having the old mission house connection is a good idea, a good thing. His experience in housing, he mentioned that he worked with the Land Conservancy on TDRs and PDRs, something that not everybody would understand. Grant writing experience to me seems like really a high point. And he read the county budget. He read the back issues of the ticker. So he was digging deeper.
Let's hear from the people that didn't pick him. Rick, you didn't pick him.
I would, let me say, I picked the first 2 out of the 6 here. He would be my third choice.
Pardon?
He would be my third choice. Yeah.
Linda?
With that gentleman, I wish we were looking for a housing coordinator. I think he would be absolutely ideal, but we're not looking for a housing coordinator. And I do know the two ladies at the end of the table, think that he would be a great candidate because of that. That isn't what we're looking for. You know, as I said the time before, I think it's really important that we do not look at a candidate specifically, even as a reason that they have a home in this area already. I think that could lead us down another path. The other thing we have to remember is that home is in another county, and that hasn't been good enough in our conversations for affordable housing and housing in general. That hasn't been good enough for us, because we've got plenty of housing right across the highway, but that's not what we want. We want housing in our area. So I see a disconnect with that argument. Very, very nice gentleman, no doubt about it, but that was my concern. I think that, and I'm going to combine this, I know this isn't what you're looking for. The next step would be why I chose Harris. And as I said, I saw some qualities in him, and one of them was the fact that he seemed like somebody that could really grow into the position. So if I were going to choose someone, one of these two as a third interview, it would be Mr. Harris over Mr. Fuller, just because there isn't already a predisposed way of how things would work. If I were to choose a third, it would be Harris, because I think he would be, and I'm not sure if molded is the right word, but he could be molded into an ideal county administrator for Leelanau County. That would take some time though.
Yeah.
Mr. Fulmer has a lot of great qualities. However, I don't know if those qualities match what we're looking for in general. He's got pretty specific area that he's worked in all of his life. And I do notice that throughout his career, he's moved around a lot. I think we're looking for somebody that wants to put roots here and stay here and become part of our community here in Leelanau County. And as Melinda mentioned, we're not looking for a housing director. He would be great if we could offer him a position here in that regard, but that, as Commissioner Lautner said, that's not what we're looking for. So that's kind of where I'm at with that one.
I would like to have my turn at, clearly for me, my first choices were Lamb and Allen. And I see that all six of us here identified them. I did not like Harris. I saw Harris with some potential, but I thought he was confrontational. He kind of bragged about always being on the side to criticize, and some of that's okay, but it made me a little nervous. But I also don't want somebody we have to grow into the position. I think we need somebody that's already there. I chose Fulmer because I like his style, but I agree we aren't looking for a housing director. We're looking for a county administrator. So let's go around again now. Everybody's spoken, so let's everybody speak again and see where we are. Yes.
I would like to say that I mentioned that I love his housing experience, but that's not what made me choose him. We wanted somebody with county governmental experience. And while I liked Deb Allen and Lamb, and they were in my first three picks, neither of them have that governmental, working with governmental agencies, working in government. Pat Lamb's is kind of at school, which is good. But that's not why I chose him, because he's of his housing. I like that part. I like it. I thought the most important thing was his experience with governmental entities and in that world and managing large groups of people. I also happen to know that Patricia and I compared notes in the hallway or something. She really liked Homer too. I'm sorry she's not here.
Gwen's had our second round, so anybody want to respond to Gwen's, and then that's what Lois and we'll all respond. And so anybody want to respond to Gwen? Yes.
Yes, thank you. I apologize. Commissioner Allgaier was absolutely right. That isn't what she said today. I was going off of the conversation that Commissioner Allgaier and Commissioner Bailey had after last meeting. And that was what I took that from, was your conversation when you were the afterglow of that meeting, just talking casually, and that's where those comments came from. So, thank you.
Anybody else want to respond to something that Gwen just said?
I think I agree.
Okay, go ahead, Nadine.
Housing, because he has experience in housing, means he has to have experience working with lots of different agencies, because it's a very complex subject, including governments in every township and village that are around the area. So I think that's a broad experience.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm not seeing it, but Glenn, Commissioner Allgaier said he's worked in government with
Governmental entities and
he's worked with governmental entities, which is a lot different than
in government, because he works for the housing authority for
he
the
manages.
state.
He manages the public housing. Oh, okay, I do see that. So thank you for that. That's what I was looking for, to see where you were coming up with.
Yeah.
You know, and I just want to point out one other thing. We've got a commissioner who sits on this board that comes from the school district. And we also have an administrator who's been here 10 years that came from the school district. So
I'm not saying that's a bad thing, because Lamb was my second choice. I'm just saying it's not what we said we were looking for.
I would also like to respond to that about the school district, because Pat Lamb was not a typical school superintendent. He was an assistant superintendent with lots of boards, agencies and boards. He had for each of his skill areas, he had a business and community board. So it's a little different than a school superintendent, and probably a broader experience in that respect.
Although Deb Allen was my third choice, I do have some reservations. Her experience is more in social work areas, related areas. She really has no government experience at all. I think she's a really nice lady. I think she'd be a good manager, but she comes with probably the least relevant experience, in my opinion, as far as I can see.
Lois?
Let's see. Deb Allen has, I think she was the only one that expressed that she'd been working with a tribe. So she had that kind of local knowledge and experience. It's important. We didn't ask that of everybody else, but it's a possibility that they would touch tribal governments in other places.
Rick?
As I said here, and listed everyone, we kind of already have two candidates that we, and I don't think now's the time and place to pick them apart. I think our job today is to pick who wants to go to the next level. And because of what we saw 2 weeks ago, They may show up this next time, and they may be a rock star. We don't know, so we can sit here and pick them apart. But I think we need to wait and watch them do a second interview. And we gotta go back to, what's our main purpose here? Is to get a county administrator. I mean, we had Mr. Janik that came in here 12 years ago, or 10 years ago.
Seems like
And
50.
this county was kind of rocky, and he's taken us to where we're at today. He's done a great job. We have to look at, it's 2022. We gotta think down the road to 2022. We want an administrator that's probably gonna be here for 10 years, have some strategic planning, and start looking at what we're gonna need in the future as a county. Not just today, we gotta look at it. We gotta look down the road, and so I mean, we need to, today, just pick our 2 or 3, 4 people, whatever it is. We've already picked or chosen 2 by a vote, but we need to wait and have them do the second interview, and then we start having this discussion.
No, disagree.
I couldn't agree more with that. I was a little concerned about sitting here having, in-depth conversations from a 45-minute interview process. So,
one possibility would be for us to bring in the 2 people that everybody at this table said they were interested in. Keep the third one, should we decide after that interview, those 2 interviews, if we wanted to reach further, we've got another person identified. That would be my wish, but I'm only one.
Here's the flip side of that, and it's up to you. If you do that, I'm putting those advocate, you send a message to those 2 candidates that maybe it's not the right fit. So they may have second thoughts about taking it. If you say, well, if you're gonna pick, if you want to do 3, do the 3, because if you just do 2, and they say, well, they're still candidates, but we still do a third in, that kind of sends a message to those 2 that, I'm not talking about these 2 people individually, but you may get second thoughts from candidates, say, well, do I really want this? If they can't support the initially, that's kind of sending a negative message, consciously or subconsciously, that maybe it's not the right fit.
What was the vote on the third phone?
3.
There was
3, but I
3.
know Patricia would vote for him, so that would be.
well, you can't say
I
that.
Yeah, we
No,
can't.
no,
I only gave 2.
Okay, originally we thought, well, let's see if you want to do this. Originally, what Ty proposed is, I believe you said that any candidate gets 2 votes should be, if any candidate gets support from 2 commissioners, they probably should get a second interview, right, Ty? Is that what you said?
That was my initial thinking.
Does people agree with it?
Well, then we're gonna have like 5 people.
No,
Why
if
don't we,
you bought a straw votes, that would give you 3.
why don't
2
we
votes.
just move forward with it?
Pardon?
I said, why don't we just move forward with that if you want to interview 3 people?
But I don't want to bring in a third candidate if 3 commissioners already know that candidate is not a fit. Because I think that's not the way to go. I heard from 3 candidates that, I mean, none of the 3 down there did not select the third candidate.
Well, I said, yeah, I picked 2. If I were to pick the third, I guess I should have picked 3. I would have picked. If that helps you.
Would this group feel comfortable then, interviewing those 3?
This candidate is going to be coming from South Dakota. So we will have to,
Put them up.
Travel and hotel.
yeah. So I don't know if you want to rethink that or, if you're okay with that.
It is what it is. Yes.
So you gotta remember, and this has happened numerous times. You had 45 minutes. You got a gut feeling. Most time you pretty accurate, but I have times where unofficially a candidate's number 1 and they do not do well second round. I had one case where we picked at the last minute, the 4th candidate to be in the final round for principal interviews. And he just blew everyone away the second round, got the job. So you're right. There's a different setting. You'll see maybe a more relaxed or maybe a more nervous candidate the second round. They may give you more deeper answer, or they could give you a very shallow answer. One time we had a candidate that everyone thought was number one, the first round. The second round, he gave the exact same answers. There was no depth there when they had a chance to expound on it. He would give an answer that sounded good, but he was asked, can you give us more information? What do you mean by that? There was nothing below that surface. So you're right now, we're not critiquing. It's whether you want to interview them for a second, if you think they have potential.
Rick, you wanna-
To go,
Pardon?
on Fulmer's behalf, I mean, the other two, we saw them in person. Fulmer, I mean, the reason I'm on the fence with him is because of the Zoom. I don't get a good feel seeing him on Zoom as in person, the other two were in person.
Melinda?
Well, I'm just listening to the debate here. I wanted to bring in a third candidate, and it's a split board on that. So I guess I'm kind of wondering also that if we're going to bring in more candidates on a split vote, we would just consider Harris again. And for the reasons I said earlier, but also in my notes, I got down where you saw something different in his interview. I saw confidence. And I thought that that was a very good trait to have coming in here, is the confidence to learn and I've got down management style, which I seem to like. So we want to bring in more candidates on a split board. Maybe he would interview totally different a second time. But of all of them, the last time we took a straw poll, these are the 4 that got at least some votes.
Okay.
Mike, I have several concerns about Harris. The biggest one is, as far as I could hear, he's never managed people. This, if nothing else, is a management job. It's a lot of other things, but he has no management experience, and I've been a manager. I've been a supervisor. There's a broad, big learning curve. And it's a completely different world than he's been immersed in. He's been a political activist, he's been a legislative aide, he's been a county commissioner. And none of those things prepare you to take over the management of a building of, what, 118 people? So I would definitely not want to be training our new administrator in how to be a manager.
Well, we have 3 suggestions on the table. We have one suggestion that we have 2 candidates that everybody thought was worth looking at. We bring in 2. Then we had a suggestion that maybe we bring in Fulmer, and we have 3. And now we've got a suggestion we bring in 4. So without doing more reference checks and without knowing anything more than we knew from the first interview, that's all the information we have. So we have to make a decision. So one more time, let's go around and hear from everybody. Of those 3 choices, 2, 3, or 4, where are you leaning? We'll start down there again.
3. Do you want the names?
Yeah. Well, this is a second round of informal votes, yeah. Go ahead.
Deb Allen, Pat Lamb, and I'm open to hear from Fulmer.
2. Lamb, Allen.
Lamb, Allen, and Fulmer.
I agree.
And Helen Fulmer.
Yes.
Let's have 3 interviews.
Okay.
Would somebody make a motion?
I would make that motion that we interview Pat Lamb, Deborah Allen, and Carl Fulmer for the position of administrator of Leelanau County.
Second that.
Any last discussion on that? All those in support of that motion, say aye, please.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Now we can look at dates.
Could I make one further request of our HR person? I think before we bring in somebody and arrange for flights and arrange for overnight stay, that we need our HR person to do a little social media checking and whatever reference checking that we might be able to do. I just think that's a responsible way to go.
So with Deb being gone, Deb Allen, that's till October 9th, that we're gonna pull out all three after that.
Well, that's what we gotta talk about, but if you want to, we can set some dates and time. Darcy can do the generic background search. You don't want the full week, that would be the final. You just want a generic, which we can certainly do, and make some reference calls. I can tell you usually from reference calls, we talk about, it's people that they're giving us the call, so we'd be glad to do it, but we can confirm their dates of employment and all that, so I'm sure you'd be glad to do that. Rick.
And if I may ask, that's for all three of the candidates, correct? We're
yeah.
not singling out one.
No, all three.
Thank you.
What you probably will do, once you have a finalist, before you offer that person the job, you want to do a complete thorough background search, but that's separate than this.
Everybody comfortable with that?
Okay, so if you look at dates, Deb Allen is gone through October 9th. We need, obviously, especially with Carl Palmer, a couple lead time and so forth, so look at your calendars. Don't have a calendar, you have one, right? Okay. Thank you. Made it one.
Courthouse closed 10, or are we open, we're open to 10?
October? Yeah, yeah.
She's gonna have jet lag on the 10th.
Oh, Deb Allen, yeah.
Is it 12?
Yep.
I'm wondering if we could start with the other two candidates before Deb Allen gets back.
I was just gonna do
Yeah.
that. Yeah, you don't have to do them back to back, you could have a gap.
Do them on the 10th?
I'm actually thinking the end of September, first part of October.
I would suggest the first week of October, you could do something.
We've got,
We
we're
have a,
gone 2 days.
pardon,
We're gonna be gone 2 days. We'll have jet lag.
you're gone to, oh, yes, well, you will, I will.
What's the
You're
date?
You're
going.
not going?
What's the date?
Melinda's going on the honor flight November, I'm sorry, October. Actually, you have to be at Camp Grayling the afternoon of the 4th, and you'll be flying the 5th, you'll be home on the 5th.
Could we interview on the 7th
Friday,
and
The
interview
afternoon?
on the 10th?
I can do the afternoon of the 7th, and I can do the 10th.
I can
okay,
do
so
both
on
as well.
October 7th is a Friday.
So you can only do afternoon, so that's one person.
We could
Of
do
course, that
two.
could warm us up. Get us in for.
Sorry, one, we get 2
We
in.
could do two.
You could do two on the
With
7th.
our meet and greets too.
Yeah, we just schedule those concurrently.
Okay.
I think someone brought a good point, and I'm not sure what time Deb is flying back on the 9th. But to have her come on an interview the next day after in Europe, it's just not fair to that
No.
person.
Well, there's time change, isn't there?
Yeah,
as well?
just the lag, and if any of you have been to Europe and trying to come back and adjust, it takes so long.
I should probably get in it. Then.
Then
I,
the-
I don't know, yeah, and if there's any flight delays,
Yeah.
it'd just be,
No, they're not flying it.
Would the 12th work?
the 12th would work for me.
No?
And for me, she said yes.
Yes.
I'm
Oh.
gonna be unavailable the 12th through the 18th.
Um, so we can
11th?
go on in the afternoon.
no, we have executive on the 4th, because we moved
Yeah,
up.
that's right.
You do have an evening board meeting on the 11th,
Can we do like 3 o'clock on the 11th and then we'd
Good.
be up here?
yeah.
That would work. I can do the afternoon on the 11th.
Okay, so
But
we're
Deb's
interviewing
gone
her
after that.
under pressure and
I
duress.
mean, with the Fulmer, he has a place there. I mean, would you want to do them on a Friday or Monday? Maybe you'd want to come in. I don't know.
Well, we could do two on the 7th. Let's assume if we do two, we could do Lamb and Fulmer on the 7th and Deb Allen on the 11th. Right? And Darcy and I will work out. On the 7th, are all of you free all day?
7th?
Yeah.
I'm available after 12.
Okay, so afternoon, we could do two, just be prepared, that's gonna be. Can we start right at noon?
Uh-huh.
We can do the meet and greet, start at 11 or 10:30. We
Okay.
actually could do the
Yeah.
interview, so we can get. We'll work on the schedule. So, but all of you are free from noon on out, okay? So we'll plan the first interview at noon. Because I don't think you're gonna rush through it, so.
Okay, and then the afternoon of the 11th, you said?
Yeah, I think that's what we're saying, right? Because there's a board meeting on the,
So
In
if
the
we time
evening.
it right, we could,
yeah, I'll try to do it towards the end of the day, so
okay.
we'll come up with a
Okay.
schedule. I'm thinking,
Candidates are there.
I'm just thinking we could do a meet and greet at 3 and do 4, because you don't want to go home, I think, so. I'll just stay afterwards.
We have 3 candidates selected and we have 2 dates selected. I think that's all of the business we have
That's a
on this item.
lot of progress in 45 minutes.
Any last thoughts on that? Let's take 5 minutes and set up for our budget meeting.
We're good.
That's not.
I was just waiting on you.
Yeah, thanks. Usually she doesn't answer, she texts me right away.
Yeah, she didn't text me either.
Oh, I did have it. Oh, it's not there.
No, if she didn't even text, then Robert's in trouble.
No.
So
Okay, we can talk.
now what?
We should be done.
I was gonna tell you. It is a person who I trained years ago.
Is there coffee in the building, Chet?
Yeah, come to our office or go to the construction codes.
Let's meet at two.
Oh, they're trustees.
roll.
Oh,
He had no experience. He's probably one of the best administrators in the state.
You were lucky. So Glenn was not said. So when he has this. Guys, and for him, when I go to Adrian. It's weird.
Yeah.
It's weird. It happened. I can. Till 5, went to bed. May as well watch a movie. Might as well do something. In the
That's
middle
not
of the
my
night.
choice.
But anyways, he's on medication to keep his heartbeat low. So his was only 70 to 80. First day he felt lousy, he was disoriented. But then, then he's sitting there saying, shouldn't you do, shouldn't do something. And he said, no, it's like your heartbeat is 78.
Yeah, that sounds like that's so severe, but otherwise it would be like brother Rich. had, two radiation treatments. And I think
My
he's-
brother has too.
I think he's past it now. Controller. Coming down the hill with somebody on the bike. Don't want to have medical problems.
Yeah, you don't want to go into atrial. My brother had an ablation too, because he would go in and not come out.
Well, Rich was so tall and so thin, he stood up suddenly, it was like he was going to faint. Very.
Oh, yeah, mine was 168 for 3 hours. I didn't move, you just sit.
Was it a move during all that stuff?
No, I'm sure you can figure it out.
Okay. Bad vibes. He said no, there's too many things.
Oh, there's only one person. I thought it was two.
Seems to be happy about closing the whole time and not voting to support the commission extension.
There he
For all things Margaret, trying to be valuable.
And your two are on.
Okay, great. Great, great,
Oh,
great.
here it is. Nobody else turned in comments but me.
No, that's a good battle. Went well.
What did I say? I said, here's.
So John, I had a constituent call me, said, isn't there something we can do about what the sheriff did with those meetings? I said, he's an elected official. Just said,
So have you been working on houses?
What's that?
Have you been working on houses?
I mean, I go out week after for a sign.
Oh, okay.
No, I haven't had a chance. I'd like to.
Please unmute.
Come on, folks, in here.
Yeah.
Come on.
I mean, he's not a new employee, he just put this together.
He's-
Take it all
Well,
night.
with plenty of help. No, it just took until 5 minutes ago.
Thank you.
They were hoping you would stretch out the discussion till
Like
2
talk
o'clock.
about, yeah,
But,
all the new hires.
New books, if you see steam coming, that's because they're hot off the press. There might be some.
Like
hot
too
ink.
hot to touch.
That's there you go. Well, this is our revised budget, and I was joking with Jen a few minutes ago. I feel like the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit are here with me to help us get through this. So I'm just gonna give a brief overview, because really these two did a lot of work. She's been called out, I think, never the Holy Spirit. before, right?
Never.
Okay, it's a new one. Good.
That's a new one.
That's a new one. So, no, but actually, just want to tell you that a lot of time has gone, especially in the last week here. And these two have done a tremendous job. I'll really start by acknowledging their efforts, because I think we have a realistic budget. First attempt was made to put the budget together, which I appreciate all their efforts. And since then, at that time, literally it was your first week here, I think.
Yeah.
And you have a chance to look at it. So really the last month, they have spent a lot of time going, especially the last week or so, going through the budget. And I think I speak for the three of us that we feel very confident this is a very accurate and up-to-date and current budget issue. There's things we need to have dialogue on, but I'll just say a couple of things. And when I'm going to speak, I'm going to give you a revised memo, so don't have to worry about taking notes. Everything and I'm not going over this whole thing because I kind of went through it last time, but a couple of highlight points, and a couple of you gave me suggestions of things you want to talk about also. So what we have in the budget, and I'll let them get the details, would have projected income of 15.4 million, and expenses obviously of 15.4 million. We estimated using fund balance of 1.5 million, which is a little less than last year, but fairly close to the last couple of years. As all of you know, we always our revenue is always very conservative, and our department heads always do a great job of keeping their costs down. So outside the 1 year where we did the roof next door and HVAC, we have always had a balanced budget with surpluses, even with extra payment to MERS. And 1 year we made $1 million extra payment to MERS. So I'm confident that trend will continue in 2023. Some of the big issues we need to look at that will impact, I'll just casually go over them, but once you'll get a more detailed memo from me. It'll list all these more specifics, because I know this is our first time. Not any order, the motor vehicle fund, the cost of cars have skyrocketed, as you can imagine, for patrol cars. We're estimating pretty low. Under Sheriff Kiesel got some direct quotes. No, I'm just going over this, then they'll go over, I'll just give you the general overview of things we need to talk about. But the cost of the sheriff's cars have gone over.
Was it in the very first part of your book at all? The memo,
Just got it, so
or tucked onto the side?
This, you have the old memo, you don't have the new one.
No,
Yeah.
that's July 29th.
But
Yeah.
she was- No, it's not new. That is what he's talking about.
I will get you a new memo tomorrow, okay?
So this is the July 29th.
Yes, but there's some
Yeah.
changes
Yeah.
from it, so kind of disregard it.
They were just looking
And I
at it.
won't go over it, but just some of the things we need, that in my opinion, we need to talk about is the motor vehicle fund. Some things, some big issues. The biggest here is the HVAC in this building. For those of you that have been on the board a couple of years, we knew we had a problem. It's not getting better, it's gotten worse. The heat pumps are failing at a greater rate. They're difficult to get, and we need to have a serious discussion how we're gonna go forward with that. The new towers and the potential new leases on those towers and the cost of that, something that we need to discuss. Shouldn't be a great cost, but the Wi-Fi in this building, several of you have mentioned that you want to make that a priority to talk about. And some other things that I won't go over yet now, because I have a list of things from all of you that I made. So I want to say that you'll get a memo from me, probably an email as early as maybe tomorrow, that's updated from my July 29th memo. But today, I know it's the first meeting, so I thought it'd be helpful to have Jared give an overview and Jen chime in here, and feel free to ask questions. This is, I think, more of just a dialogue here today. And then at the end of the day, I believe we have a meeting scheduled for the 22nd.
It's next Wednesday.
Next Thursday. So we leave today, I'd like to start the process of going over through the budget, depending how much we get done today. And there goes to be out here by 4 o'clock.
Yep.
And then we'll just stop where we are and see what we want to do for the next meeting. I believe there's one scheduled after that on the 26th also. So we got some time to get going. So Jared, you want to just start? Like I said, I will email a revised memo to you probably tomorrow.
So, yeah, Jen and I sat down and went through everything together. So all the changes that you see in front of you were discussed by both of us. A lot of the revenue changes that we made, we weren't sure going into next year if there was going to be either cash or a fund balance to transfer in from various funds. So we dropped some of those to zero just to be conservative. We kind of looked through the cash or the fund balance carryovers and kind of projecting forward whether there would be any money on that. If we weren't sure, we just dropped it to zero as a transfer in. So the general fund went down a little bit in the revenues coming in, and that's why you see an increase here in the fund balance that's going to be used to balance the budget. I did get the motor vehicle fund stuff from the sheriff. So we had projected around 140,000 for the capital outlay for that fund. It came in at about 216,000. So 216. So the problem with that is going to be is there's not enough in the motor vehicle fund to fund those purchases. So we'd have to look at either transferring in from the general fund or maybe upping the mileage that is going to be a reimbursement to that fund. Right now we charge 30 cents. Yes. Oh.
I do have a question if you don't.
Well, I do. I just didn't want to interrupt you. I was trying to get in the queue for a question, but some of the zeros are like pistol permits and FEMA, and some of those things are what you took to zero.
Some of the transfers in from other funds that we had anticipated. So for what the DTR interest, I think before it had like 43,000 coming in, it already has less than that. So we just dropped it to zero. We're not sure what it's going to be.
So like emergency FEMA, we should get some funds, we just don't know yet.
Right.
Some of them, right. If we didn't know, then we just said, we'll put it at
There will
zero.
be pistol permits, right? There will be some of those.
There
It's
will
always
be.
easier to add funds,
Yeah,
knowing you get them,
So to
than
make sure.
trying to
Yeah.
explain why we didn't have enough money.
right. We were pretty conservative with a lot of these, so we anticipate it coming in higher than that. You know, once we get closer to the end of the year, we'll have a better figure.
Are you charging 30 cents?
Yeah,
For
so,
up to 80.
yeah, just, okay, so, and I just want to, not that I want to step, I know Lois, this is your first time. So has anybody, that's okay, before we start, has anybody talked to you about the tabs that are on your book, that what these represent?
No.
Okay, so I think
Sure.
we'll start there,
All right.
okay?
But
So,
before we move on.
Yeah.
When we were talking about the budget and the numbers, and maybe this question is for Chad, in the motor vehicle fund.
Yeah.
How many vehicles typically how many of the vehicles that we currently have are paying into the fund? And is that number going to increase?
So-
That's a decision we need to have.
right, so.
The vehicles are, well, go ahead.
Okay,
you know.
so the vehicles that you have other than the construction code, so like yesterday, it was talked about the auction on those two vehicles that belong to construction code. The previous director, prior to Amber, decided that they were going to pay for vehicles out of their own fund. And it was Mr. Hogan, and he wanted, those were his responsibility. He had the money, he paid for them, the county didn't allocate any funds. So those two that you sell, that money will go back into, because it's owned by the fund and it's a business entity created like a business, it'll go back into there. The rest of them goes into their fund. The rest of them that are not construction code, they pay 10 cents if it's over 80,000 and 30 cents if it's under 80. We adjusted that, I want to say maybe 3 to 4 years ago, when the cost of what we used to get was Crown Vics. And then we went to the Explorers, and that cost went from 22,600, 26, or 22,000, 26,000, 33, and now I think we're up to 46 to 48 to outfit it. They used to be able to outfit it. You took the lights and the radios and you moved. Now I think each year Ford's changing it a little bit, so it's new lights,
it's new equipment, and I think that's what maybe, I didn't get a chance to look at
It's
Jim's, but a lot of times we got away from that.
So is it just 4 of the sheriff's vehicles that are gonna come out of the motor pool fund?
I believe that is what the
It is
request
for
is, and
4
we haven't
vehicles.
made a copy of it yet, because it was something that he just received, and we were talking about, because the issue you have with that is we had put money into the 2007 plow truck that was fixed. The 2007 plow truck you replaced this past spring. There was no budget for that. The TNT needs a truck. When I was finance director, I did talk with the undersheriff and sheriff. We said we'd purchase a white truck. There's no money in the motor pool for that. So Jared and I have talked, and over the next couple of weeks, I'm hoping to get the budget amendment for you next Wednesday night. There will be a motor pool adjustment. I believe after I and Chet talk, you will be transferring from the general fund into that motor pool to supply the TNT truck and Jerry's truck. So we're already short this year. So we don't see the income for next year.
Okay, so. Senior services,
Yep,
they bought a couple cars, right?
yes, mhm,
Who pays for those cars?
they do.
So that doesn't go into the motor pool?
No, and EMS does do a rental, so emergency services with Matt's car, he's a general fund, so that does come from the general fund, and he does mileage and gas. Mhm.
So the only vehicles coming out of the motor pool fund,
Really is buildings and grounds, and you're 24/7.
okay. And do we have a
The drain
number?
commissioner has a truck, but it has like 150,000 miles on it.
Well, it's
Yeah.
something we still pay for.
It is, but yeah,
Spending
so
money
you
on
get 10
motor
cents, yeah.
So the question is, how many actual vehicles are paying into that?
And the very last underneath your supplemental, I believe they provided with you a list of those vehicles.
Okay,
It's the second to the
Yeah,
last
it's-
page.
I'll look for it.
Yeah, yep,
What may be helpful is, Jerry, you just give an overview.
each
And then,
tab.
and then, no, just an
Oh.
overview of the budget, and then Jen, if you go over the tabs
Oh, gotcha.
and what's in it,
Sure.
because some of your questions may be answered, and then let's have a dialogue on what issues you want to address, and what
Okay.
questions you want to address.
So we routinely replace 4 patrol vehicles every year.
Well, they cycle them out
3 to 4.
pretty well, yeah.
And we've already purchased them for 2022.
Done,
Yes.
2023, we gotta worry.
yes.
Gotcha.
So Jerry, why don't you just give an overview, and then Jen can go over what the tabs mean,
Sure.
because we have some new people, and then just have open dialogue on what you like to have discussion in next future meetings.
Yeah.
So what are we running for mileage? on those? Oh, we get rid of mileage.
I think the limit in the contract is between 120 and 140. I think you're running 140 if you look at the
That's
auction.
about right.
Is that about right? We
Yeah.
auctioned about at 140,000 miles, maybe?
Yeah.
Say contract budget or in their contract?
No,
No,
it's our.
But in the union, in the POA, in the union contract, you have with the deputies, you have a maintenance schedule and how much the cars are before they replace it, I believe. It used to be.
Yeah, it's. but
It
that's-
states after so many thousand miles, the union requires that the maintenance of this schedule, and then
Safety
That sounds
issue,
like it,
right?
but, maybe
we could look at that.
Well, we're
Your
in
yeah,
negotiations tomorrow.
Mhm.
maintenance, 140 sounds the same. Low.
It used to be 80.
It used to be 80, used to be 80 on those Crown Vics.
Vehicles are built much different than they used to be too.
Yeah,
Well, since there's
Yeah,
some
so
sort of
my-
regulation about that as far as the miles, the safety issue of.
Well, it's an internal thing.
yeah, it's an internal, it's like a policy, I believe.
Whatever the union,
Yeah.
there's nothing that
No,
says. they-
there's no,
Yeah, well, I wanted
And
that
the mileage.
clarification. It's an
Yeah.
internal or it's a,
yeah,
Mhm.
it's an internal.
The mileage is 28,000, 61,132, but that's Roush's car, so that's not in the.
And I think they typically like to look at maybe keeping 3, I haven't done that in a while, but maybe 3 fleet, just in case one goes down, that there's one to pop into.
I
Mhm.
see 2 fleets.
Okay,
How long does it typically take to get 140,000 miles?
it varies, the policy is that they have a take-home car, so if, depending on,
Roush is a 2013, but he doesn't do road patrol.
no, so typically it would be, depending on the route, like if they're coming here first or wherever they live inside the county, you have deputies up in Northport, you have them all over. I'm guessing, if I remember, maybe 2,500
So
a month.
So they are planning on selling 4 vehicles, one of them from 2013, one from 2015, and from 2016, and then the Marine pickup from 2006. So
So
that gives you-
those, I was wondering about the 142. I thought
Well,
my
that's,
car's got 270 and it's doing fine, but.
well, that's for
But
our
we're gonna
jail
start,
administrator,
but
so he's
it's-
just doing.
But it's.
Pickups. Mhm.
Yes.
Yep.
But our two fleets are
I
both
wasn't
27.
done.
Okay, go ahead then.
Sorry.
I thought I answered you, so go ahead.
Oh,
But-
hang on.
But on the other hand, 2015, 2013, it's not like we're doing it every couple of years, so
Right.
maybe.
Right, it's a rotation.
But can we find out why it's 140?
It's a
will look
mutual
tomorrow.
agreed, it's a
Mhm.
mutual agreed
Mhm.
about
So
number.
it could be changed.
I
Well, we
believe
can,
that's the
but-
number, but we can look in the contract.
I don't wanna go on and on
Yeah.
on this, but I mean, is it possible to look at the cars that we are getting rid of? I mean, when we get close to that mileage, are they nickel diming us? I mean, can we get another 25?
We probably could, we have not had
A
major
discussion.
issues,
Mhm.
but just,
Just for perspective here, we got a 2017, 147, a 2017, 132. We got a 2018, already got 124. So they put miles on these cars. There's a 2019 already has 76. So they're putting some miles on them.
well, like Jerry
Like yours,
said,
I would think.
they seem to average about 2,500 miles a month. So do the math, it adds up pretty quickly.
On the other hand, they seem to be good miles, just driving,
Yes,
Mhm.
those are easy
Mhm.
miles,
Mhm.
so I'd love to look at the 140.
but it's a great discussion, but if we want to stay focused, we're done by 4 o'clock. Let's give the overview. And then let's talk about what items you want to discuss, because motor pool's a good one. Yeah, I'm saying we could get bogged down.
He will have
these
that
are-
answer tomorrow.
We're trying to get you to say, okay, so let's have Jared give his overview, then Jen will go over the tabs, what they mean. And then we can have a discussion on what you want future dialogue, and depending what time it is, we could start today, just depending, so go ahead.
Okay, yeah, so like Ched said, overall, we're looking kind of in line with last year, depending on some of the updates that we're gonna have. Obviously, we're getting more stuff in that's gonna change the budget every week. So we'll keep updating it, and if there's anything major, we'll definitely bring it up in any time.
Mr. Chairman, he needs to speak up so we can hear him.
All right, no, I was saying we're kind of in line with last year, with the fund balance carryover, it's actually a little less, but depending on what gets decided here, if we're gonna do the HVAC system and stuff like that, we'll definitely need to be pulling some money. Probably gonna be asking for DTR money if it's gonna be on that. Our expenses, stayed kind of right in line with last year. We just gotta decide on some of these issues, for different capital improvements and anything like that, what we're gonna do. So then we can get it in here and give you some updated figures.
We did built in the 3.25% pay increase for next year. However, depending on what you do next week, that obviously is not calculated into the budget.
Most likely, Jared and I already talked about that when that goes through. It'll be an amendment for 2022. You would put this off and use your L429 next May to make up that difference that you're looking for. So he would propose this as is, not make all those changes in salaries until next year. If that makes any sense. It's just a lot of work.
Are you suggesting that we increase the taxes on our citizens? Is that what you're saying?
No, what I meant is this proposal with your staffing level stays as is with the 3.25 built in. My suggestion that Jared and I were talking about is not also build in that 3% right now. That he would make an amendment in 23. When,
Okay.
right, so I'm
So,
sorry,
'cause
your,
we'd change
my
every
apologies.
fund.
Yeah, your L429 each year. So like, let's say for right now, today or yesterday, you did an L429 that is for senior services, early childhood, and for the road commission. Okay, so you do this one in September, and that dictates what's going to go on the tax bill December 1st. When you do this in May, it dictates the general fund collection, and it goes into effect July 1st. Because we utilize in our revenues, and we can talk about that because I'm sure we'll get to that today. we are utilizing the L429 of 22. So Jared and I did all of our adjustments in August.
Numbers.
Yes, you will have a new number for the 23 budget, but you don't know that till you set this rate in May
Sure.
for your collection. And so typically, it's anywhere between $300,000 to $500,000, depending on how much the taxable went up and how much the rollback is. So that's what I'm stating is when he would utilize that, he would do that in preparation for the next budget cycle. All those salaries would be incorporated within that 2023. It's easy for him to move on and produce your 2024. Okay, all right. Good,
All right.
okay, so tabs. For Lois, I know the first tab that you're gonna have is gonna have your general information tab. This is gonna be your appropriations and your budget rules. Typically, the board decides generally it's closer to the end of the approval process to go back to those and look at those, if there's any rules, changes and so forth. So that's under the general information, and those rules are set to produce and follow through with how Jared and the accounting staff process your invoices and your bills. Some are Friday checks, we call them, utilities, anything that is an attorney fee, they all fall into the rules that you create that bind this book, okay? Anything not listed goes through claims and accounts, must be presented to you for payment. Does that make sense? Okay. The next tab you're gonna have is your revenue summary. This revenue summary, the finance director and the treasurer and equalization department all work together to create this revenue summary for you. And so we'll come back to this one because typically we start with revenues when we start to discuss your budget.
Just for you see there's orange there. So if we give you a new tab, it'll be a different color. So when you're looking, always refer to the latest version. We kept the old tabs in there.
So your orange or salmon
So if
would
you
be
see,
the ones you're gonna look
there
at.
may be two sheets, same numbers, but they're different colors. Always go to the latest version and the color that we're telling you to go to.
So on the expenditure summary tab, that's the next tab that you have. This is a combination of your revenues and your expenses. This tab is placed in here to show you that we have, and the public, that we have presented to you a general fund that balances, meaning all the revenues tie out to the same amount as the expenses. So it's a 3-page, it's by department, and it shows, it basically is telling you which department has which funding that's being proposed through the general fund, which is your tax collected on your L429. The next tab is going to be legislative. Legislative starts with the Board of Commissioners, and it goes through to your attorney fees, your Northwest Council of Governments, and it ends there. Typically, most of these tabs are going to be by numbers. So these are what we consider your 100s. And so that's in the first tab. So it's 100, 101. So these would be your 101 tab. The next one is public safety. This tab is going to encompass public safety, which is going to be your sheriff's department, all the departments and or contracts like we have with Leelanau Township, Suttons Bay Village, also the Marine, Animal Control, and also 50% of Mr. Matt Ansorge's wages, because the emergency services pays for his wage there. His title is split 50-50.
Is TNT in there?
Yes,
Okay.
yep,
TNT is what?
in under public safety.
Travis Narcotics.
Oh, yes, the Travis Narcotics team.
Yep.
Under the justice is going to be into your department number 250 into your 300s. The prosecutor is placed here. So we look at anything that could be court related. So it'll go through prosecutor. It'll go through the probate and family courts on the second floor. It'll also be district court and circuit court contractual services. It also funds in here the friend of the court, which is an agreement with you and Grand Traverse County for employees, and it's a contractual service, as well as the funding of the law library, which is mandatory by state statute that you have, along with the supplemental portion of what is your child care, and that is under what's considered a special fund, which we'll talk about later, okay? The next one is public records. Pretty much that encompasses the elected officials as the treasurer, the clerk, the register of deeds. The first page of that tab is the apportionment, because that was done last year to redo that. That is the first page. This only has activity every 10 years, but it's going to have activity in there now for the next couple. So we follow into there with the elections and the clerk, and it should end at equalization. And that's what we would call the Department of the 400s. Under Human Services, these departments start with a 500 number. They will range from your Department of Health to your Health Department supplement to fund that, to your substance abuse, your ambulance services that are also mandated by an MCL, your medical examiner, your mental health with the agreement with Northwest Michigan Community Health, yep. This also includes the Department of Human Services, and that supplements a fund. Also your veterans burial. And I will lead into this one just a little bit because it's not something Jared and I talked about. And so I will discuss just a second. This has always been $300. So I did a little bit of math. That's 36 veterans at $300 gives you 10,008. Last year it was discussed to possibly move that to 500. So I think that even though it's not on the agenda, because I didn't think about that until now, is that you may want to increase that to your veterans, and that is that comes right from the general fund. The information is provided to us from the Grand Traverse Veterans Services in Traverse. And then you go on within this grouping is going to be your medical examiner, your veteran services. And this one, and then the new one that Jared and I discussed, and we hadn't done this in probably over 10 years, is you have a state statute that states you are to support soldiers and sailors relief. We haven't transferred money into there, and that's the last page of this grouping. And so we're looking to put $2,000 in there. The balance of that right now is $1,800. And it comes and goes. Sometimes it's bus cards, sometimes it's groceries. There is a specific veteran that has to fall into that group to get that specific benefit. So we are going to look to fund that again. The next tab is your resource management and development. That is going to start with your Michigan State University Co-op. And that is going to go through what we call the Department of the 600s. So this is going to be your planning commission, your soil erosion. And this one ends with a new one that we did last year, which is also a 700, which is your water quality. And so that is the last tab there. Internal services and transfers. This is going to start with your accounting department. Within the accounting, after the accounting department, you're going to have your county audit, your insurance, your bonds, your unemployment, your workers' compensation, your internal services. And this internal services, when we go through that, is actually a pension payment to MERS. Your Parks and Rec is also found underneath this one, as well as any budgeted fund transfers. So these are funds that we support, meaning the general fund supports other funds. And that last page here, we end with contingency. You do have a policy on contingency. Jared and I talked about that. It typically is 3% of what your general fund is. And so we have, he has put that number there. The next tab is your special funds. I think one thing that I forgot to mention to Jared is I gave him a fund outline for the board.
Transfer.
Yes, there's a transfers and a transfer out, and we can produce that for you. As well as Deb, last year you asked me for an awesome tool where all the funds are listed and basically what their function is. I did not see that included this year. So I think we can print that.
Yep.
So that Lois, you can have which fund, before we get into the funds, what does this mean? So a 200 fund is generally a special revenue. Yep, meaning revenues coming from somewhere. A 300 is a debt. And then we have 400, 500, 600 means cost allocation. And so we would, we can give those sheets to you. So when we get to the funds, you'll be able to identify what funds that is.
Classification numbers.
Yes, exactly. Classification numbers. Yep, yep. And then the next tab after that, you're gonna have your staffing levels. And Jared did have just a couple changes that he implemented in your books. And I believe,
I
did
don't
you?
know if they're in there or not.
Oh,
yet,
okay.
But we did have.
We can
Two
give you,
changes.
yeah, we did have 2 changes.
Yep.
So we'll make sure that you have copies of those. And then under your supplemental information, you have your narratives that come from the departments of their requests. You have your vehicle listing, and then I believe you have the non-union wage schedule that was prepared by the budget team for your review.
So it's the chart of accounts that you gave us last year, is that it?
Yep, and then on that, there's, it is the same, and then there's also ones, I think inside there, you'll find the funds where it lists what that fund is for.
So I'm gonna copy that right up there.
Yes, that, mhm.
This one.
Yep, something like that. So you can copy or we can print it. I have it for last time too.
Grab it right now,
Oh,
yeah.
it's up to you. Yeah. So I think typically if you want to go forward for a little bit, we usually start with revenues. Okay,
This is last year.
yep.
Sorry, what?
Did you want to go ahead and start looking at your revenues? Okay. All right, so as Jared talked and discussed, you are under the first tab of revenue summary and you are on page 1.
Bring forth 1,000,005.
That is the number currently to balance your budget. You will see on the second line down under the current taxes of 402. That number of the 10,8 is the and 402,003. Your L429 equals that amended as of 8/16. But Jared and I had discussed that John, the county treasurer, had put in the 334 into settlement and adjustments. And so I think if John wants to speak to that, that's why Jared and I left that the way the numbers are there. So you'll see in our amendment from August, we increased the 402 and decreased the 420 because the settlement had already come in at 243. So if you come back to that year to date, you can see that it was 285 in the column where it says as of 6/30. Its actual to date is 243. So we brought that down, and in this year we bumped that top number up. So that's where that comes from. So we've left that there, and John can you can have John ask that or answer that question because Jared and I didn't really have the answer.
Right, yeah, and your columns as you go across, right in the middle there, we have the 2022 year to date. That's how much we've actually gotten this year. Then the 2022 amended budget was what we had done through 6/30/22 in the budget. 2022 amended budget was those amendments that we had on August 16th. So that's why there's a little bit of a change between those two columns. It's what was kind of like the original budget before, and then what happened after 6/30.
And we kind of talked about internally, we thought if you give you a half year, that gives you a true snapshot. Because if you start doing through August, it kind of, half year is easy to say, okay, let's see where we are, can we double that? And see where we are, if there's any things we need to look at, any questions. We thought June 30 was a good snapshot to use.
Do you think the 334 is conservative?
I believe so. I believe when Jared and I were talking last week, when John was unavailable for us to talk to, my guess is that he's anticipating that the settlement might come in higher than it has in the past. Looking back, if you were gonna increase your settlement, I would probably look at the 2020 COVID number, meaning if you had people that weren't going to be able to pay timely, that number was 285, because they had been out of work or how that had come through in 19 and 20. 21, it was back down to 247, and year to date was 243. And collection of your taxes is January 1 until to February 28th, I believe. And like you said, John can speak to that. And then, so once that's not collected, they pay back to the general fund through the delinquent tax. And so that's where that number is included in there, because it was paid out before June. So that would just be a tweak if there's, after John presents and you talk there in that number. The rest of them, John has prepared coming down. If there's any questions, it looks like there's just basic, little bit of up. If you see, like, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 from the bottom, it says emergency management FEMA, and you'll see that there's a 0 there for 2023. So just an FYI, Jared also was in the same mindset that we have in the past. We do not put in a grant into your revenues until we know that they've applied and been approved. And that's always in the budget year that happens. So in 23, Matt will probably receive his FEMA grant, the budget gets amended, and then that number is plugged in. So a lot of times you're working without your grants that are going to be applied for. So that's when you see that 0, that's what that reflects.
Are we still in line for like 14,000?
It's usually 18, yep.
Well, we already got 4.
Well, this one is actually an interesting, for 2022, the 3985 was an extra payment through COVID money from FEMA.
So we could still get that.
So it's possible if they're looking to give COVID, it's typically 18, and we consider that portion of Matt's wages and expenses there.
Are they paying for monkeypox yet?
No. And I was actually really surprised when that came, when I was this past winter, that was even that they were adding on, to EMS like that. And Matt was like, yeah, it's COVID money. I was like, okay.
2 years.
Yeah. So there you could see more, and Matt might have some more information on if they're looking to give him more money. But as Jared and I said, we have the same mindset that we love extra money.
Yeah, and
we
of
do
course, we
love-
wanted to present something that was probably less than what was gonna be coming in. We
Right.
don't want to present it as
Right.
more and then have to go back
I
and say,
actually
well,
appreciate that because it gets us closer. It
Yeah.
gives us wiggle room
Mhm.
as we
And
move along.
it's more like this is worst case scenario,
Mhm.
that we have to use this 1.5.
All right, so page 2, if you go to the next page. So on page 2, the second revenue down is your American Rescue Plan. It's your ARP or ARPA, whichever way you want to say it. Now, this is a working document in the sense to each time you make a motion to spend your ARPA funds, that motion needs to state that it's an ARPA. And Jared and I are going to look back because I think there's a few from your February meetings. It just said, it's just a motion and it didn't say ARPA, but we want to be able to track that. If you spend over 750,000 of federal money, then it's a single audit. And
So that is up in the air right now. John's actually at a meeting and he texted me because I wanted him to find out.
Mhm.
If you go over because of ARPA, there might be a special audit that you can do, not a single audit.
And that
So
would be
if
nice.
the remaining grants that you have do not hit that 750,000 threshold, then I believe there is a special audit you can do and you don't have to do the single audit.
The single audit, what they do is they take your board motions, they take your expenses, and they thoroughly dive in to make sure that your federal expenses are all accounted for. And it's a pretty thorough, we haven't had one in a long time. So,
5 years. or
yeah,
so?
rather not. I mean, I'd have him rather not.
Yeah.
So anyway, so that's why you're gonna see the 250 right now, as of the 8/16, 2022, in that third column, so almost to the end there. That's the 250 that we amended. You had a broadband payment, so that's what that is. And then we've again made that 0. So your ARPA will not be reflected in this working document.
Right. There's money sitting there. It's just, we don't know what to match it up with. We don't know what's going to be paid with it. What is it, the 4.3 million or so?
Yeah, so coming down farther on this page, If you come down to your secondary road patrol, your 543.001, your marine safety program at 544. These are also grants that are applied for within the year. We may find out from secondary road. I know that Jim just processed that. So with that amount, it's possible. But again, we're typically looking at the 27,456 for this year. And that is a state calendar year. So we would plug that next year. And then you just come on down. Now this is a new one under 548. It's called County Veteran Service Fund. You'll see it had 42,759 and it's now at 0. This is a grant that you've been approved for. It's handled by Michael Roof out of our Veteran Services. It is going to state 0 now. Their calendar year is September 30th. Any and all money that is not spent of the 42,759 this year, we have to pay back. But I know that he might be going through a process of applying for another one. And so again, this is one that Jared would bring in front of you once the grant's approved. Coming down on this page, there really isn't too many changes. The victims' rights went up a little bit. Convention and tourism tax went up a little bit. Revenue sharing is fairly new to us because we used to have a lump sum. So the 574 revenue sharing, Jared just got that and updated. Yep. So that's now at 527. So that helped offset a little bit. And that is payments coming from the state of Michigan where we used to house Melinda May. It was a fund that we got to front the money, got to get interest on it. The state is still in the process of auditing that fund. It has roughly about 38,000 in it. Hopefully, we're hoping it comes to us that we get to keep that, but they have to tell us before we get to move it.
So can I ask you what the tourism tax is?
Yeah, the tourism tax, I know the treasurer's office could probably give you a really big back portion of that. We collect the 110, or the state gives us the 110. It is a tax collected by the state. 50% of that goes out to it used to be called substance abuse, but it's their northern regional.
Oh, so this is the liquor tax?
Yep. No, this isn't liquor tax. Well, it's convention and tourism. I wouldn't call it liquor, but it does go to the Northwest Michigan regional entity. It used to be alcohol. I thought
Liquor tax.
No, I thought you sat on that at one point. It's a regional entity. And then it went through, Michelle probably know the background on that. So we call it substance abuse farther in here. But I think it's so of the 110.
I've heard it called tourism tax.
Yep, it's a convention and tourism because our liquor license, or otherwise it's liquor license. And maybe we could ask with John, but that's what it's always been in here.
And for us, it's liquor tax dollars.
Okay, it's convention and tourism.
It goes
Okay.
back from Coble
It's
Hall.
one-
Yeah, it's Coble Hall.
Yeah, it's Coble
So
Hall. That's how it
right.
started.
So 50%, we have it budgeted out going 50%. So yes, you could call it, is it Coble Hall tax? Is that what you
Well,
said?
that's the unofficial.
Yeah,
That's how that
It's,
started.
for us, it's under tourism.
And the NMRE and the sub thing.
Yes.
liquor tax.
Okay, gotcha. This is what we call it.
Interesting.
I don't think the state wants to call it liquor tax.
And it was Cobo Hall.
Yeah.
Yep. So that's that one. And so you'll have an expense of 50% of that going out to that entity. And so that's through that page number 2.
And are we restricted on how we spend those funds?
It automatically comes in. Oh, on our side of it,
No,
No.
it has to go through
But
that
on
funding source.
the entity, 50%.
Yeah, and then we get a
50%.
percentage.
Well, that's my question.
Yes.
What do we do with the other 50%?
It funds your general fund.
So it
Whatever.
goes to general
Yep, you could
fund.
look, if you want to consider it a sheriff's department or whatever, but yes, it just funds us.
I was just
So
wondering.
Yeah.
We could use that for housing.
Well, actually, I was thinking we could use those dollars to fund our substance abuse program. I mean, we just signed a new contract
With Lyft, yeah.
with, yes.
And that's in that expense for your substance abuse is under the Board of Commissioners budget.
Another
The
option you
30,000
have
there.
is you could use the opiate settlement money to fund the substance abuse too,
Mhm.
or a combination of
Portion
that.
of it.
Yeah,
Right,
Yeah,
right.
some, there's a lot of
Well, the
options.
point is we've got $55,000 here that's just going to general fund.
Mhm.
We could take that and use it to offset the cost for the opioid task force. And then it would leave the settlement dollars for programming.
And you can always split off in your budget under the board if you wanted to do that.
I would ask my fellow commissioners to consider that.
When we get to that.
I've been trying to think of some sort of funding mechanism for housing too, so that's another thought.
All right, keep going, Jen.
Yep, so page 3. Not too much changed on this one. A little bit of district court, they put bringing that down a little bit. The rest of it looks like it's pretty much status quo. So page 4. Typically, the top of this page stays very consistent. When you get down to 614.001 is your register of deed services and your register transfer tax. The deed services stays pretty consistent. Your transfer tax goes up and down. Mostly since 2019, it's been on the upswing. And so right now you'll see if you get to that third last column, we're at 300,000. And then, so next year, the budget figures from the treasurer are 270. We typically go conservative on here, and then if needed, we'll up that through the year next year.
So transfer tax, that's just when there's a sale.
Yep.
So if we see that we have diminishing property sales, that will affect us.
Mhm.
Yep. All right, that looks like the next one down. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, do we have
Yeah.
any control over the transfer tax?
I don't believe so. I believe
No.
it, but it's by state statute. I
Yeah,
believe it's by
there's no-
statute.
Statute?
I believe so. We could double check with Jen, but I believe
I'm
it's a flat,
95%.
yeah. it's a flat,
Sure.
rate,
we have no-
and it gets collected at time of sale, I believe. The next one coming down is a slight change. The 614005 is the Register of Deeds website fees. So you can see that there's a slight decrease going down in there. But Jen, I think, presented a couple months ago that the copy fees, they're making more money there. So you're actually going to find that revenue split now between the two different items. So we'll find that here a little bit later. The Register of Deeds IRS services. This is one that can go up and down as well. And so this year to date says 1537.90. When we brought this to you in August, it was already over 4,500, but we have put it back to the 1,000 that they had originally placed there. But that just goes basically with how the market or what the IRS needs copies of deeds for. Addresses, they bumped down a little bit. That might be one that's probably going to come in higher. As you can see, it's 41, 44, 66. Year to date, it was 36.95. And for already in August, we pushed it to 4,500. So if you wanted to up that, that's certainly your choice, or you can leave as is.
That's to to be assigned an address?
An address ordinance fee. Yeah. And then sheriff services, it's been 668, so 3's on the conservative side, up to you if you want to up it. Through June, it was 4,500. So that's up to you.
What are sheriff services?
Sheriff services, there's a general things that they do at the front desk area, and we could also have Jim talk about that too. So that in lies what they do, because they also have a sheriff overtime special event. So we could double check with Jim, but it'd be anything that the staff does that you produce a fee for.
Like fingerprinting.
Fingerprinting, yes. There's a portion that they collect and a portion that goes to the state. Let's see here. I don't see any other changes. The live scan fingerprinting. Now this one is based on a little bit of the sheriff's office, as well as anytime the clerk does a CPL. So anytime there's new training, there's live scan fingerprinting, and that revenue is there. This is one you could also consider if you want to bump that one up. Clearly you can see the history is 46, 48. Through June, there was already 1,700. So that's up to you. If you want to increase that by a couple thousand, that just offsets the fund balance being brought forward.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be
2,000 there, you want to bump that up to 2,000 or 2,500?
500.
Okay,
Yeah.
2,500, we'll bump that one up too, so. All right,
Let's see that works out.
right. Page 5 of 7. This is gonna change here at the first of the year. It looks like, they're proposing, you have a 628, which is your copy fees. You have a set schedule. Each office also, can charge rates for copies. And then there's copy fees for register of deeds. So what this would mean is any and all fees that the register of deeds is collecting effective in January of 23, this account number will be used. So that second line down and across, that's where that other 25 comes to play. So it was 50 before on website, now she's splitting it 25, 25. And so they're in line
The
there.
recommendation to do that?
It was, I believe the treasurer's recommendation and probably Jen's,
Yep.
yeah, yep. Coming on down, again, not too much. The circuit court bonds, it looks like they're looking for more forfeits, so they've got 4,500. District court revenue is 1,800 that they've placed in there. Interest earnings, whoop, whoop, bumped up to 15,000.
Wow.
Wow.
Well, it's better than a couple of years ago.
Right, right. And then miscellaneous reimbursements and your gamings, those are all zeros. That depends on what transacts during the year. Usually we don't plan for that. Animal control is the 5,000. I believe that was yesterday on the meeting that you approved. The Grand Traverse Band.
Are
Animal
they
control.
under donation?
Oh, wait, oh, I'm sorry. No, this is a donation.
Right.
So actually, I apologize, Jared and I missed that. That is gonna be 0. We missed that one, because that was plugged into August, because you accepted the donation at that meeting, or, yep, prior, yep. So that 5 is gonna come off of there.
So the 5,000 comes out?
Yep.
Yeah.
Because you do your donations only in the year that they're collected. Okay. Overtime special events though, that will benefit, because what we're gonna do is we're gonna take that 5 from that animal and we're gonna move that to 5 where the overtime, because so that's just a, yep, just a data entry there. So we're gonna move that down to 5,000 there. So perfect, nothing changed. Canine Marine, those are all gonna be at 0, because again, it's a donation, so you work within the year. Your Leelanau Township officer, this is the amount that's projected on the expense side. And so Jared and I had talked about that. We always, if the expense side shows 106, we put the revenue as at 106. And then Parks and Recs donations, we don't have anything. Same with Suttons Bay Village officer. The 91,370 should match the expense. These next ones, the 677, or I should say, I guess just this one is placed in here. This is our indirect cost recovery for friend of the court. They have an office up front, although or upstairs, although everything's been by Zoom. So in this case, this is a cost allocation plan. It's paid for out of the county board's budget. The plan has to be approved by November, and it's used for our funding as well as state funding. And I know that Jared will be working, if they haven't already, supplying all of our information from last year's audit and our transactions. And they do a cost allocation for us so that the state has something to approve so that we can bill out for prosecuting attorney and certain state grants. You have to have that in play to be able to get those reimbursements, or you wouldn't be able to.
By November.
And that I believe that plan has to be approved. They'll put it all together and they'll give Jared a draft. That he kind of looks it over, Chet signs it, and then it's sent back to them to be implemented for the next year. So that's that line item right there. Been in use for a very long time. Not too many changes, I believe, on page 6. I don't see any, other than the second from the bottom. So the actually third from the bottom, the transfer in from the DTR fund. If you go across that line, that's 25,000. It's been implemented that way for as long as I can remember. And that is something that the county treasurer years ago implemented to help offset, in essence, wage and fringe within the department. The next one is your transfer in from your inmate housing. This, you are going to see a decrease in. This is one of the funds. Inmate housing, if you wanted to make a note, it helps fund 211. I'm sorry, it's funded by 211. So 211 sends money into here. And when we get to those special funds, you're gonna see a decrease here. I talked about it last year in your budget. And at that time, when we prepared the budget, we did not have the current contract with Grand Traverse Band. It was negotiated less. So that's why you're gonna see a decrease here. We are, when Jared and I talked, we are pulling the 153. I believe in 24, you will not be able to pull that. We believe you won't be able to pull that much.
It looks like right now it has about 184,
Mhm.
so that's why.
And
we
you want to
dropped
have
it.
your fund to have some fund balance, of course.
Yeah.
And so in 24, that number is probably going to shrink a little bit more. All right. The next one is the operating transfer in for recycling. This is just came down just a little bit. Again, this is the cost allocation plan. And we look at that and we look at the expenses that are typically done by treasurer, clerk, insurances, board of commissioners, attorney fees, and those we're able to bill to our funds. And then that comes back to the general fund because we do not cost allocate our insurance, but we don't, our workers' comp, we don't spread that over. So you're able to collect that in from those funds.
Is that under commissioners?
Um,
Is that what the attorney's under commissioners?
Yes, the attorney's under the 100s, and then farther down into those internal services is your workers' comp and your MMRMA, your insurance carriers. And so we do not cost allocate those. And so they do it for us and then we bill it back. Same on page 7. So the first one at the very top, 699,013 transfer in revenue sharing. This is a 0. And the reason this is 0 is this is the number that we talked about that's going to be audited from the state and we're hoping to be collected. Jared and I discussed this last week because you actually have it to be done in 22. So if you look at your current to date year, there's 0 because it's being audited. We hope that money comes in 22. Come back from the fund when we get to the funds. And I think, did you say that has 38?
I thought for some reason that it was
38 on
around
here.
38.
38,
yeah.
35 that we
But
hope to
I know
come
it
in.
was less than the 40.
Yeah, it's less than the 43 that we looked at last year.
Yeah.
So that's why this is 0. And then this would drop off when those funds are finally moved. It has its own separate checking account. That checking account will be closed and that will go by the wayside. The next one is automation, and then there's PRE. So automation is dollars that is collected through the Register of Deeds and that the cost allocation is used to bring in there. The PRE fund, the 30,466. There's a 46-54 split in the treasurer's office for PRE and deputy treasurer. That's cost allocated by expenses. So you're looking at salary, wages and fringes. And so that's that number there that gets pulled. The CPL fund, again, that's your cost allocation plan. You come down to the next one, there's going to be a 0 in the early childhood because 2021 was the only time, which was actually 20, where you supplemented early childhood to get it going, and then the next year it was paid back. So that line will always be 0 from now on. Your 281 is your senior services direct cost at 75,943, and your direct cost of your business type activities, which is your construction code at 542 of 86.1. And that concludes your revenues. The next tab then is your expenditure summary. So any changes that gets made in the revenues and or expenses, this then gets reprinted for the general fund. It gives you a brief overview of looking at each department and kind of gives you the total of what you're looking for if someone was to state what's going on. So I think just for an FYI, if you have since we have a few minutes, I'd like you to look at page 1 of this. And I'd like you to come halfway down under emergency services. So under emergency services, you'll see in 2019 that you had 111,000. Under 2019 audited 123. This is your norm, typically. 2020, COVID, CDBG grants. And again, in 21, this is why you have 274 and 269. We also, out of this line item, you will be finding your ARPA funds. That was something that Chet and I discussed in the past, that we put our ARPA, anything federal and emergency based, we put it under emergency management. So that's where these numbers fall into place. So when you spend your ARPA funds, if you come all the way to the second to the last column at 384, that's where that number is going to be representative for you. And so I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, it helped us be eligible for grants.
Mhm.
Do you remember that CBD grant that not all counties took advantage of? We did. We got about 200 some thousand. Some of
Yep.
it we passed on to other townships.
Mhm.
Was to make it eligible to meet the guidelines. We chose to do that, and it did help our cause, and we were
Mhm.
successful.
Yep,
Yeah.
so right now, it's in there at the 99,784, so I just wanted to let you know that that's pretty much when we get to that, that's just your standard EMS, your emergency services department, when we get to that line item, but it will change every time there's an ARPA or something like that, and Jared and I discussed, and we were kind of a little bit in a rush, the cleaning yesterday. Did we approve COVID cleaning for next
Yes,
year?
yes.
Okay, that's where this would come from. So we'll amend that budget for sure for this year and then for next year for those COVID cleaning costs. Because it's not something that we're going to spread out to every department. That was just something that we had talked about early on, that we would put it in here, the general fund would absorb it versus going to Jerry's and then you're splitting it everywhere. You know, so that was that. So I just wanted to touch base on that one. Otherwise, the rest of these are pretty consistent. I want to say the only new one that you'll see on page 2 is very similar all the way down. Midway through, it'll say soldiers and sailors relief department total, and that's that 2,000 that we talked about to fund those per that state statute. And then another item that we are going to discuss, and we talked with Chet this morning, if you come to the bottom of page 2 and you come up 4, you're at the contingency. In 2022, we did place into contingency at 614. We were looking at the sheriff's boat, and it was placed in contingency for the payment of that. In hopes that there is a boat purchase, or if it does need to roll to next year, we have put it back to 440. In the event that there is a boat, that you would be funding it either from your L429, your May allotment, or bringing fund balance forward versus having that repeat itself with that larger contingency than the 3%. So that's what we did this year.
Okay, so you usually do 3%. It's inflated to 614, but you said it is actually
The 440.
440 is what it should be.
Yep. So we put that back to there. In the event, even with the 440, if you had to pay 170 or 190, you still have plenty in that contingency. And you're looking to approve and then amend in 23 for your salaries and so forth. So you really have a firm budget. You know, you don't, anything to even use that 440, we haven't dipped to it in a very long time. Sometimes we use it at the end of the year if we have the drain commissioner with those drains. Sometimes I would dip into that, but a lot of times we have additional revenues we can utilize, you know, versus using that contingency. All right, and page 3 just gives you the totals, showing you that you balance your revenues and you balance your expenses. Mhm.
And one thing that's not in here, because it's not official yet, is the opiate settlement money.
Correct.
So
When that
that-
revenue,
And we
it'll
will
dip
have
in.
to create,
Mhm.
because that'll be coming in for next 18 years,
Yeah.
once we have a firm
Yeah.
number. But that's obviously, we just got the first notification last week and it's presented to the board. So I'm guessing 15,000 a year for 18 years. We got our first 9,000 some dollars approved last week.
That was well worth our trip to the attorney's office.
It was, and coffee at Frenchie's we had, remember that, the 3 of us there, yes. Well worth the drive to Traverse City.
All right, so what is your plan? I know you want to be done by 4.
Yeah, well, and that's, we said, it'd be nice to have a dialogue, if we can do it now or continue, but what you want to see the next 2 meetings? Because if we want to schedule people, we want to get on the agenda. So obviously Jared and Jen have been very busy. And even as Ty Melinda knows, we had a discussion yesterday, and so a lot of this work took place between yesterday and this
Printing
morning.
today.
Printed it
Literally
all
this
out.
morning, the copy machine was going all morning long. I was debating whether we should make a bet, whether we're ready by 2 o'clock. I did promise them a luxurious meal, but
With
I
a view of
promise-
the bay, I said.
Oh, yeah.
I promised them the hot dog from DP gas station was a turn,
Mhm.
Yeah.
but she wants something.
She said a
little.
fancy place.
She said,
Right down there, it's gotta be.
Right,
Yeah.
that's what I was thinking when I say a view of the bay, we'll probably get Subway.
Jared was very grateful for the hot dog, but.
Oh,
Jared
yeah.
wants-
But he also didn't know that there was Gil Spear and there's always happy hour. I
Yeah,
wouldn't have a view
so-
of the bay, but hardly
By
ever
the way,
had
that's
that.
not in the budget. We'll
No, it's
we'll
not.
take care of that.
That's on
internally.
Chet's. He's gonna have to ask Jane for a little extra expense
Yeah,
there.
there'll be an internal budget meeting. in my house.
Get happy enough, you won't care if you see the day.
That's true, this is true.
So I guess I would say,
Mhm.
since you did, I know this is just our prep.
Mhm. And you have a chance to look, obviously.
We haven't really had to-
No,
Yeah.
no, no.
Right, however, I've always found it is, very useful to go through it. Department, but I've heard that it's, that's really not what everyone wants to do this year. So do we want to just look over supplement pages next time at the requests? I guess that's where we should begin. is
Well, let
looking
me,
at the requests.
Some of you have taken the time to list your priorities and send them an email, the stuff you want to talk about, and these are not in any order. And we don't have to do it next time, but these are things several of you have suggested that we talk about. Obviously, the HVAC, and we all agree we need that's mandatory. We have to have some decision on that. The health department building. Are we gonna look at the downstairs? Are we not gonna look at? Are we looking at building a building? Are we not looking at building? That is a major budget implications that we have to discuss. The Leelanau Tower, Ty, I know it's a big issue for you and for us. Matt doesn't have that work done, but maybe during budget process, we should assume that it will happen. If it does, where's the money gonna come from? Because we have to be prepared for that. I think all of you have said that either formally or informally, that's a major issue of concern, that there are spots in Leelanau Township that cannot call 911, and how we're gonna address that. It could be ARPA funding. It could be another round of ARPA funding, who knows, but we need to have a discussion on that. The Wi-Fi, public Wi-Fi technology for this room and the room downstairs.
And website.
And, the website, yes, the website's on my memo list here. Yeah, and I'm just going to stuff that I've got from commissioners. Capital improvement plan projects. There's a lot of projects. You all have a copy of the capital improvement. Are we gonna fund some of those? Looking at the other ones that some commissioners have, they're all kind of the same. The issue of the vehicles, motor pools, the Parks and Recs request, the Dam Authority has some requests, the Great Lakes Boat, which you kind of mentioned. Like I said, I'm not going in any order. These are things, the campus facilities director option, or do we want to expand our partnerships with DNW? Just an overview of things we need to talk about. Some of the things we did talk about that I believe is in the budget, help me, Jared, if I'm correct. We did put some money in there for MERS, as we always do. We always make the assumption you want to continue that. And it's 250,000, which we have used the last couple of years, and some years in December, November, you get some more money in. So that already is in the budget, because we're assuming that you'd want to do that. The web page design, I think we're all in agreement, and we're all actually going out for bids now, so I'll give you a number. Redesign our webpage. It's 10 years old. It's not very user-friendly. It may have been okay in 2012, but in 2022, people are expecting greater services. And there's a lot of benefits for that too. Matt has a request for new dispatch consoles, software updates, capital improvements, as I mentioned, motor vehicle, we talked about. The circuit court recording equipment. Parks and Rec has a request for various projects that equal $50,000 or plus. Boat tower, I'm just looking at my list here. Drain districts, I think Steve has learned very valuable lessons last time. I'm not sure where the status is of those districts. There may not be any in 2023. Is the one in Solon Township. He's going to rebid that next year. So even if they do it, it probably won't occur in 2023 because there's a long legal process, as you all know, what to go through. And because the bids came in so much higher than anticipated, they put a hold on it, and he has to rebid it within a year. He, at least is telling me, he's looking at rebidding it probably next year at some point. So even if it does happen, the funding probably won't occur to 2024. So
Did we not hear from Steve that he needed more hours, more time and a salary?
he mentioned that, but he has not put anything in writing. I did tell him when he did mention it to put in a request. I have not received anything from him, so I don't have anything.
What?
His salary is what?
15.
15,000 a year?
And it has been that way for many years.
That's why I have a question, these salaries.
Yeah,
I think that's going that 15 was based on that he had one drain and now he's looking at 7, the workload, I believe.
yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things I like to have a dialogue is our spending limit for department heads and elected officials has been 2,000 since I believe 1990,
Way before me.
1990 some. And
that's
does it
one
make sense we try to look at that and raise that? So department heads, elected officials have authority up to X dollars to have to go up to the board. 2,000 is very, very low. I think we may be the lowest in all Northern Michigan.
Lowest at what?
Lowest.
That a department head can spend without approval of the board.
So some
I
of
think
the,
that's why our budget always comes. in.
well, I mean, it's worth having dialogue about. I think
My
that's,
dialogue.
I think I covered everything that the commissioners have given me, or it's on my memo list here.
The possibility of youth detention costs of some sort.
Yeah, I don't have
I
that,
don't
but
know
the year,
if that's next year.
well, I sent you a forward email where we are getting a legal opinion. Just briefly, there is a crisis in the state of Michigan, maybe the nation, but at least in Michigan. Where do we put juvenile youth? They cannot be in our jail population. There is no regional entity. They literally are falling through the cracks. There's a case recently of a 13-year-old in Northport who was in the Munson emergency room for days just because they had no place to place him legally. They have to be separated. There has to be certain criteria. I was talking to Cameron Clark, well, this morning he worked with me. There's a good chance if one is Leelanau County, they have to be shipped outside of the state of Michigan. Imagine the traumatic impact that has on the child, the family, the parents, everything. There's some talk of the state having regional centers, but that's a long way off. We've been meeting with the judge and talk about, can we do something locally, have a place, 1 or 2 beds, just in the event that happens, we are prepared.
One idea they threw out was if we don't do a health department, have a small area downstairs fixed for beds.
And we talked about using some of the jail space. The sheriff is very much opposed to that, but you know, it's built for 70 some inmates and we average, if we don't take boarders in, less than 20. Can we take a small portion of that? He is saying no, but we're getting a legal opinion because I believe that's a decision of the county board, not the sheriff. Operational is the sheriff. Facilities are up to board. So we are getting a legal opinion. We should have that shortly. So we're looking at a lot of different options.
I think you're absolutely right. I think we have to provide a jail. It doesn't say what or even where. So we technically, because the idea was, is let's take one of these county jails, I believe Commissioner Robinson, I mentioned this, turn it into a youth facility and then, you know, have
Lake,
the inmates, but also I do believe in, and I think, I really like what you're saying, because there's really, for our county, 1 or 2 ever, so really, that would make a whole lot of sense to me. It would be very costly, but probably a savings, because it would have to be somebody with them 24/7.
yes, yes.
So,
I mean, legally, we have no choice.
and just for, this was built that pods could be added onto. By design, there was, that a pod could be added. That's another concept, if the revenues would be high enough from northern lower Michigan to whatever those kids' numbers are, would it be a revenue source for us?
And we're at the very beginning stages, but there's interest in jointly a regional facility somewhere in northern Michigan. Also, Lake County has expressed interest in using the federal jail that was there. You know, that's been used as a private jail,
Yeah.
then became a federal jail. And it's currently for immigration, but that's contract expires. And that's a huge facility that's built. Can that be converted to a youth
Well,
regional center?
Regionally, makes a
So-
lot more sense.
So that's a lot of dialogue up in the air, but it is a crisis situation. Cameron Clark says if he gets a call right now, has to place a student, there is no place. There's no place in the state of Michigan.
I think it'd be good to get a spreadsheet of numbers of the jail of county residents.
Mhm.
Because we're bringing them in from Kalkaska to get our 20 a day. And do we really, maybe we don't even need a jail in Leelanau County. Maybe we do that in Grand Traverse County and we have that youth detention.
And even if we used a few beds for youths, there's somebody in that building 24 hours a day. Not
Okay.
that they would be responsible.
They can't be responsible. It's a whole different.
No, let me finish.
Yeah.
Even though they wouldn't be responsible, you mentioned downstairs. Well, everybody leaves here.
No, if there was a youth, there has to,
I know it's different.
no, but even
At least it's
downstairs,
a Building
yeah.
that's functioning
Yeah.
24 hours a day. anyways.
but even if it was downstairs, if there's a youth out there, there has to be a staff person at all times. Yeah, so
That's
it's,
my point.
yeah.
There's somebody, the lights are on over there 24 hours a day anyway.
Right.
It just makes more sense than downstairs.
Perfect world, the idea, we gotta get sheriff to come on board. We share the same court system, so you have the same judges. We've gone because of COVID, we've gone to Zoom, prosecutor, Joe can do a lot of his work right here. And eventually we're ready to take our inmates, if we
Yeah.
made this just a juvenile center here, and it would,
Well-
in a perfect world.
we are getting a legal opinion on who controls the use of the jail. Is it the sheriff or is it the county board? Because he has made his feeling very clear. I'm not telling anything confidential because he's been very open about that.
To Glenn's question, see, the problem is, it's either juvenile, you can't have any adult.
But they could be reconfigured, yes.
No, you
Wait a
can't.
minute.
Oh, you
Yeah.
can't.
Well, the building, there have to be separate walls, everything,
Yeah, it's
separate
cost is
entrances.
just- Yeah, I can't, that's why it's gotta be, one or the other.
But if we get a legal opinion, I think it'd be worth our time
Yeah.
to have
Yeah.
that discussion.
And the only legal question is, because, and we'll go, if it wasn't bonded, there's no question it'd be the county board, but this board bonded that building and there's specific guidelines in the bond documents, the way they were structured. And our attorney wants to make sure there's nothing there that says it'll be strictly used for a jail only, because if that's in the bond documents, we have no choice. We have to go by those.
That's
Usage.
without the bond.
So that's why I don't know if you saw the email I just forwarded to you. The attorney's asking for all the bond documents to determine what was the specific guidelines when the bonds were issued. How generic or how specific were they?
Probably it was law enforcement center.
Yeah, so we'll get a legal opinion of that.
Law enforcement center.
So I guess we have a meeting on the 22nd, correct? I guess, would you like to just go over these late on the 22nd? Would you like to set some people in, or would you do a combination? I guess it's all up to you. One of the things that at least Chairman Wessel and I talked about is streamline some process that we're not, I mean, you're all adults. You can go through the department head's budget line item by line item. I'm not sure we need to do that, as some years we've done that. If you have questions, obviously, that's one thing. But for the major issues, we thought we start with the major issues and get those resolved. And then kind of go from there where you want to be. Our guideline is obviously have this done by December 31st by law. But it could be November, it could be December. It's up to you. The only specific guideline is we have to approve budget by December 31st.
So I have a question. I'm pretty new too. We have all these needs. We have a certain amount of revenue that's unallocated, like $1 million, it sounded like. But we also have the DTR. So what are our options for like HVAC?
Well,
That,
this,
that sounds like it's something we just gotta bite the bullet.
well, there's, and I'm just talking general terms and they can be more specifics. Obviously, there's options. We can use our fund balances for that. We can use DTR. We could bond the project. Our only bond is for the jail. Without going to a public vote, we could bond. We talk about if you want to build a health department building, one of the viable option is bond it out. You know, it's like getting a mortgage over a period of years. Our audits have always been very good. Our bond rating is very good. We could easily get a bond to build a facility and not impact the general budget because you don't want to impact. When you look at the extra MERS payment, it's been great we're doing that. It's not mandatory. Some arguments are you never will be funded 100% MERS. So are you better off using that money on projects? We are at the A grade of our MERS, so we don't. And the one issue that we don't have, that a lot of counties are struggling, is post-retirement benefits. For some counties, that is a bigger issue than the MERS payment. And we are at zero there. We don't all, you can argue it's good or bad. Good news is we don't have any obligation for once the person retires here. The bad news is there's no healthcare. There's some units of government still offer some type of healthcare, so forth. We don't offer. Once the person retires from here, they get their MERS payment, but we offer no healthcare. We don't offer any medical reimbursement or any HSAs or any of that.
Not even a Christmas ham.
Not even a Christmas ham.
We talked about bringing in our MERS
Mhm.
representative
Yep.
to kind of explain it all, so we do have some new people on the board, and
Yep.
it's always good to refresh.
Yep, and it's been quite a few years since we've done it.
If
Oh,
we
long,
do
yeah.
that, I think that might be, before we make that decision on the additional MERS payments, I think it'd be beneficial to have them brought in, but I would ask for something more to supplement that presentation, and that's what our bell curve is going to look like in the next, how many years we shared it with us, potential retirements. We had a couple last year already. And so we're no longer paying in for those. Now that's a drain. So what we've got.
Well, just by the age of our employees, if you look at potential people who are eligible to retire, we have a significant amount.
That's my concern.
Yeah.
So maybe we shouldn't be just
But, you know, it's,
really picking a number for MERS, but maybe we ought to be looking for a projection that we.
and
need to
it's
stay.
so hard to, there's so many factors as, how long are people gonna live,
Well, that's fine.
obviously?
Well, right, but I mean,
When are they gonna retire, and the investment in the economy of our MERS pension plan?
That's a question I would have now. What's the
Yeah.
last year done to our,
Well, Michelle and Darcy are going to the MERS conference next week. They always give, and I'm sure they'll do this year, they'll give a 10-year, a 15-year overview, a 5-year overview. The good news is they have always, if you look at their projection for 10 years and the last 5 years, they have met their projections. So that's been good.
well, I'm just thinking that, we can kind of project the likelihood that those that are eligible to retire are going to be retired in 10 years, say, is whatever. You would have those statistics, and I just think that might be interesting for us.
We have many employees here who would retire, but because there's no healthcare, and healthcare is very expensive,
That's part of it.
would people stay because they have healthcare? Some units of government offer a healthcare retirement thing, so that has an impact.
That's 55 years old.
So you can say it's good or bad depending on how you look at it. From a financial standpoint, it's great that we don't have any post-retirement liability, but there's consequences of that too, so there's no right or wrong answer.
We continue to work and we continue to pay into MERS for.
Yeah, yep,
Baptism.
yep.
Okay.
I'd like to see is just, we keep talking about the HVAC. I think we should just bond it out and get it done. We've been talking about it for.
Well, I think.
Well,
I was-
if you want to do the HVAC, we need to bring another engineer here and update a proposal and cost.
Or-
Because we haven't done that in 4 years. I mean, Gary O'Connor can tell you what's wrong, but if we're gonna do a complete renovation of the HVAC, we need to bring some professionals in and look at the options. We did that 4 years ago, but that plan is obviously outdated, and I'm sure equipment has changed in 4 years
That's
also.
what I was gonna say, the whole idea, the technology may have
The,
advanced, so that idea is not today's idea.
Yeah, for those of you who were on the board 4 years ago, the cost to do the entire building was a 3.5? Deb, Melinda, Ty, do you remember? 3.5 million? Around there, wasn't it? Yeah, and we said, wow, I mean, the whole building cost 8 million or something like that, so.
It's gonna be a lot more now.
So what,
Commissioner
Way
Rushton.
more, it's gonna be-
Well, that was kind of my point, it's gonna be a lot more now, so if we're gonna seriously take a look at this, I think we should have a discussion with our treasurer to see, and our finance director to see what funds are available to us. We need to take a look at what the bond cost is. I mean, there's just a
I
whole lot
agree.
of
I think that'd be the place to start. So that have
Yeah.
have the treasurer and look at the funds.
And the thing is, right now, we're putting Band-Aids on the problems. It's not an emergency yet, so if we're gonna look at it, we need to take the time to look at it and see what our options.
Here's
are
the-
financially.
Reality, even if you said right now you want to do it, by the time you get an engineer to come up a whole new system, go out for bids, get the equipment, realistically, we're probably looking at end of 2023 or early 2024.
So what are the statistics right now on being able to get that type of equipment to a job site?
Well, here's the reality, heat pumps, which are not that complicated. I think I mentioned we ordered 3 first part of July. We don't even have an estimated delivery date.
Right, yes, because we don't know where that stuff is being made and how it's
And-
getting to us.
When I talked to Gary, he mentioned it to me. I mean, it's gonna be like this winter if we can't do it.
Well, we're fixing the ones we can. We're putting bandages on. He's running pipes from he's trying to do whatever he can to keep the system going. It's the worst now because it's the changeover season. That's what because the rooms are too hot. Well, in winter time, it's the issues, it's mostly noticeable in the spring and fall. But it's not gonna get any better. And the heat pumps are gonna continue to fail. We put in the baseboard heating, which has helped. But we knew when we did that, for those of you on the board, that was a partial solution, knowing at some point we're gonna have to look at the long-term solution. The argument against that was, I believe, Tony Anzorg was the most emphatic. He says, we're better off just paying and fixing things year after year. He said it would take us 20 years to recoup if we put a new system in.
2 million.
2
Yeah,
million.
it was 2 million at the time
But
when
he
he said
said
that.
20 years, and then with the time we pay it off, we have to put a new system anyway, because it'd be outdated.
How about the next session, having the treasurer and Jared and Jen here and talk about sources?
Okay, funding sources for the HVAC. Yeah, obviously, we don't have specific costs or recommendation, but if we know what the funding sources are, that may help at least help us develop a plan.
Work on that. And then I think we need to address that health department. I mean, we've been on the table forever.
Mhm.
So I think we ought to have that discussion
I agree.
and
That's something that-
Well, if John, Jared, and Jen give you an update on the finances, it does link to the health department. Really, it's the same issue in some respects, how you want to allocate your funds.
Well, I
Okay,
don't think we can bond.
pardon?
I would be opposed
Well,
to
well-
bonding to projects. And
Well, that's a discussion you need to have.
one would have a revenue source, I expect, with rent. Gonna have to see that business plan.
Yeah, it's just an option.
The only
There's
thing
pros and cons about it.
with delaying the HVAC is it just gets more and more expensive every year we wait.
That's not necessarily true.
I don't think the people who are making more money now, what they're selling us, they're not gonna change.
Well, it's like a car. Are you better off getting a new car than going in debt and making payments, or are you better off fixing your car? At some point, you can't fix it anymore. We're not to that point.
Their corporate taxes are higher. They're not making more money. They're passing it along to us. That's your point.
Okay, so far we have a financial discussion with John and Jared about funding options for projects. I would say for projects, it could be any projects. What else for next meeting?
Commissioner Lautner mentioned we bring MERS in and have that discussion.
Yeah, okay, I'll see if he's available either next week or the one after that. I don't know their schedule. So at a future meeting.
And if we get a legal opinion, I'd like to have the youth detention issue on the table.
We can have that discussion.
Pardon?
I think we need to have that discussion.
If you do that, and if we could give you a homework assignment of going through the department budgets yourselves and see if you have any questions.
Read supplement pages.
Yeah, read it all, see if any questions. Yeah, budget and read the supplemental pages. And if you did that, all of you, you may have some questions that you want to answer, or you may say, okay, we don't need to talk about the planning department budget, for example, or whatever department there is.
I think the only one, if you wouldn't mind going to your legislative tab and going to the second page, which is 2 of 85. In February, I was asked to come in and we talked about the DCS contract. And at the time, at the motion, it was 160 flat. I thought that contract, because I wasn't part of the meeting, was just for this year. So I want to point out so that there isn't a question when you're doing your homework that you're going to see on page 2 of 85, 1, 2, 3, 4 lines from the bottom. Yes, you've budgeted in 2022 for the full 160. Jared has calculated the 74,426. It gives you about $5,000 if you have a special project you need, and that's the balance of that DCS because it's
It's
19.
a monthly
It's on a
payment
monthly
of about
payment.
$6,300.
So I just wanted you to know that's what that's for. That's
Yes, is what?
the 160 you're paying for the broadband ARPA coalition or grouping.
It's Chris Scheer.
Chris share, yeah. So I just wanted to let you know so that you didn't flag that going, whoa, was 60 and then another 74,000, what are we spending? So I just wanted to point that out.
Could we start our next meeting with everybody bringing questions that they
Yeah.
have from departmental budgets and
Sure.
supplemental requests so that we get those answered?
Okay,
And also, how are we gonna, the towers need to be funded too, so we've got to talk about that. That's
Yep.
kinda
That's
like-
part of the list that I believe
Yep.
Chet's gonna put
Yeah,
together
yeah,
is
yeah.
if you're looking.
Got it.
well, I think we have plenty for our next meeting and probably enough spillover for the following meeting anyway. So that's enough for,
Yeah,
that's plenty of assignments. So you have assignments and we have assignments here.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have no public. Do we have any commissioner comments? I think it was a good meeting. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.